This wedding will never take place. You cannot become part of this family. The slap struck before the music had even faded. One moment, Aina was walking gracefully down the aisle. Her white gown hugged her figure, the bouquet trembling softly in her hands. Tears of happiness were already threatening to smudge her mascara. And the very next moment, the sharp sound of a palm hitting her left cheek echoed through the entire compound like thunder. The band stopped instantly. 400 guests fell silent. Even the birds seemed to pause. Aina stood frozen in the middle of the aisle. Slowly, one hand rose to touch her burning cheek. Her bouquet had slipped from her fingers and lay at her feet. Her veil had shifted slightly from the force of the blow. She did not collapse. But something inside her did. Something deep, fragile, and private that had taken 28 years to build. The woman who slapped her didn't even blink. Regina Donatus, the groom's mother, widow of the late Chief Donatus, owner of 3 properties in Abuja and another in London, stood firmly in the aisle. Her expensive purple osso oak outfit shone under the sun, and the gold gelly on her head sat like a crown. She looked at Aina the way someone looks at dirt stuck to the bottom of their shoe. "You think this wedding will happen?" Regina asked calmly. That calmness was the most frightening thing. "Over my dead body." Gasps rippled through the crowd like waves. Aina's mother, Flora, immediately stood up from her plastic chair at the back. Yes, Flora had been given a plastic chair, while Regina's relatives sat comfortably on cushioned seats with reserved cards bearing their names. "What is the meaning of this?" Flora cried out. No one answered, because at that moment, every single eye turned toward the groom. Martin Donatus stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored navy suit. A white pocket square rested neatly in his chest pocket. His haircut was fresh, and he wore the expensive cologne Aina had given him for his birthday. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at Aina. Then he turned back to his mother. And he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. The MC, a Lagos entertainer named Festus, who had been joking and energizing the crowd all morning, stood there with his microphone hanging loosely in his hand. For the first time in his 20-year career, he had no words. Slowly, Aina bent down and picked up her bouquet. Her cheek burned. Her ears rang. All 400 guests watched her with a mixture of shock, pity, and curiosity. Some had already started pulling out their phones. Aina straightened herself. She looked Regina directly in the eye. Then she looked at Martin, the man she had loved for 3 years. The man whose family home she had visited every holiday. The man she had cooked for, prayed for, defended to her friends when they warned her. The man who had proposed to her at a small restaurant in Lekki with a modest ring that felt enormous because of what it meant. He still said nothing. At that moment, something shifted inside Aina's chest. Not broken, at least not yet, but shifted. Like furniture quietly being rearranged in a room that would never look the same again. She lifted her dress slightly, turned toward the altar, and continued walking. Because Aina had not come this far, had not survived a childhood of poverty in Enugu, had not worked 2 jobs to finish university, had not lived on noodles 4 nights a week for 2 years while building her life from nothing, just to let Regina Donatus defeat her in public. Not today. But with every step toward the altar, she made a silent promise to herself. This is not over. To understand why Regina hated Aina so much, you must first understand what Regina feared. And Regina Donatus feared one thing above all else: being replaced. For 31 years, she had been the most important woman in Martin's life. She had raised him alone after Chief Donatus died suddenly of a heart attack when Martin was only 9. She sold fabrics in the market while her younger sister helped watch the children. She went 3 years without buying herself new clothes so Martin could attend a good secondary school. She cried in bathroom stalls so her children wouldn't see her break down. Martin was her investment, her pride, her proof that her suffering had not been wasted. And then Aina appeared. Aina, from Enugu, not from their wealthy estate. Aina, whose father was a retired civil servant and whose mother sold tomatoes and peppers in the market. Aina, who spoke confidently, who laughed freely, who looked Regina straight in the eye without fear, something no woman had ever dared to do before. Aina, who made Martin forget to call home on Sundays. At first, Regina acted quietly. A comment here about Aina's complexion being too dark for the family's taste. A whisper there among her church friends about how Enugu girls know how to trap men with their bodies. A cold shoulder every Christmas. A seat at the far end of the table during family dinners. Small cruelties delivered with a smile and a Bible verse. But none of it worked. Martin kept choosing Aina. So Regina went further. She told Martin that Aina had been seen at a hotel with another man. A complete lie. She even paid her house girl to swear it was true. Martin confronted Aina. Aina cried. She denied it. Then she showed him receipts, messages, and timestamps proving she was nowhere near that hotel. Martin believed her. He apologized. But the incident left a crack in their relationship, and Regina counted it as a small victory. Next, Regina told their church that Aina had disrespected the family's ancestors during a prayer meeting. Another lie. She told relatives that Aina had tried to convince Martin to cut off his family. Yet another lie. Each story came with tears in Regina's eyes and a trembling hand on her chest. She acted so convincingly that even people who liked Aina began to doubt her. Still, none of it worked. Martin kept choosing Aina. So Regina made a decision. If she couldn't stop the wedding quietly, she would stop it loudly. The slap had been planned. That was what no one in the compound understood as they whispered and recorded with their phones. This was not an emotional outburst. Regina had thought it through. She had even prayed about it. She had discussed the plan with her pastor, Reverend Wilson, a smooth-talking prosperity preacher. And Wilson told her, "Sister Regina, the Lord will not support a loveless union." Regina took that as approval. She chose the perfect moment. The moment when Aina would be most visible, most hopeful, most exposed, dressed entirely in her dreams. And Regina destroyed her publicly. But Regina did not plan for one person. Aina's mother. After the ceremony, chaos settled and guests began drinking while the MC tried desperately to revive the mood with music. Flora walked slowly to the front. She stopped in front of Regina. Her hands were folded calmly. Her voice was cold and steady. "Madam Regina," she said, "I want you to know that I have seen women like you before. And I want you to know, God is not sleeping." Regina waved her hand dismissively. "Old woman, go and sit down." Flora smiled. But it was not a kind smile. "I will sit down," she replied softly. "But I will be watching." She returned to her seat. Then she quietly pulled out her phone and made a call. And the chain of events she started that afternoon would only reveal itself fully 2 months later. During a Sunday church service Regina Donatus would never forget for the rest of her life. This story had only just begun. 2 months after the wedding drama, Aina discovered she was pregnant. It happened on a Tuesday morning in the bathroom of the small apartment she now shared with Martin in Abuja. She sat on the edge of the bathtub staring at the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. The emotions that rushed through her were impossible to describe. Joy, yes. Warm, fluttering joy. A baby. Martin's baby. Something that belonged only to the two of them. But beneath that happiness, like a stone resting quietly at the bottom of a clear river, there was fear. Because Aina already knew what this news would mean the moment it left the bathroom. That evening she told Martin while they were having dinner. He dropped his fork. He stared at her with his mouth slightly open. Then slowly, he smiled. It was the real Martin's smile. The one she had fallen in love with. The one that started slowly and then spread across his entire face until his eyes lit up. "Seriously?" he asked. "Seriously," she replied. Martin walked around the table and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. For a few brief minutes, their apartment felt the way it used to feel before the wedding disaster. Warm. Private. Safe. Then Martin's phone rang. The screen showed one name. Regina. Martin answered immediately. He always did. Within 30 seconds, his entire posture changed. The softness disappeared from his face. His shoulders stiffened. He became a different man when he spoke to his mother. Aina had stopped being surprised by that a long time ago. But it still hurt in a quiet place inside her every single time. Martin did not tell Regina about the pregnancy that night. But Regina found out anyway. 2 days later, on Thursday afternoon, Aina returned home from work. She was a logistics officer at a small company in Woz. When she opened the door, she stopped. Regina was sitting comfortably in their living room. She had her own key. A key Martin had given her during their first month in the apartment, for emergencies. Apparently, a random Thursday afternoon counted as an emergency. Regina sat with her legs crossed, wearing a deep red boubou. A cup of tea was already on the center table in front of her. "Sit down," Regina said the moment Aina walked in. No greeting. No good evening. Just an order. As if this were her house. And Aina was the visitor. Aina slowly dropped her bag and sat down. "I want to ask you something," Regina said. "And I want an honest answer." "Ask," Aina replied calmly. Regina looked at her with cold, evaluating eyes. "Is the baby his?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. The words hit Aina's stomach like a punch. She took one breath. Then another. She remembered her mother's words. Cold iron. "Get out of my house," Aina said quietly. "Excuse me," Regina replied. "I said get out of my house. Now." Regina stood up slowly. The kind of slow movement powerful people make when they want you to feel their authority. "You are speaking to your mother-in-law." Aina stood up too. "I am speaking to a woman who slapped me on my wedding day and never apologized. A woman who has lied about me to your entire family. A woman who just questioned my faithfulness inside my own home." Aina was shorter than Regina. But in that moment she did not feel small. "I have been patient," Aina said. "I have been respectful. I have greeted you every morning and evening, even when I wanted to say something else. But questioning the father of my child?" She shook her head slowly. "This is the last time, Regina. The very last time." Regina picked up her handbag. She walked toward the door. But before leaving, she turned around and spoke softly, almost sweetly. "I know things about this family, my dear. Things that would change how you see everything." Then she smiled faintly. "But carry your pregnancy in peace. We will talk again soon." And she walked out. Aina stood in the middle of her living room shaking, not with fear, but with the effort of holding so much anger inside her chest. She placed both hands against the wall and breathed slowly until her heartbeat calmed. One question kept repeating in her mind like smoke. What things does she know? She did not have to wait long to find out. 3 weeks later Martin came home looking exhausted, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for days. He sat at the kitchen table without speaking. Finally he said quietly, "My mother told me something today." Aina looked at his face. The guilt, the confusion, and something else in his eyes. Something that looked dangerously close to doubt. The stone at the bottom of the river inside her chest shifted. "What did she tell you, Martin?" He stared at his hands. "She said, before we met, you were engaged to another man. Someone named Lawrence." Aina blinked. "And she showed me a photograph," he continued. "A photograph of you and that man in a hotel." For a moment the world tilted. But Aina understood something instantly. Regina had not stopped. She had escalated. Now she wasn't just trying to hurt Aina. She was trying to destroy her marriage. And the photograph was a lie. Aina knew it. But she also understood something dangerous. A lie repeated with confidence to the right people eventually becomes its own truth. She needed help. Real help. That night she called her mother. Flora listened quietly as Aina explained everything. When Aina finished, the phone line stayed silent for a moment. Then Flora said, "Do you remember my brother? Your Uncle Ben?" "The lawyer." "Yes. He has been doing some research. Research about the Donatus family." Aina sat very still. "What kind of research, Mama?" Flora's voice was calm. "Careful. Merciless. The kind that explains why Regina is so desperate to control her son." Uncle Ben arrived in Abuja that Friday. He was a short man with glasses and a worn leather briefcase. After dinner he opened the briefcase and placed several documents on the kitchen table. Martin sat across from him, confused. "Martin," Ben said calmly, "when your father died, what were you told about his estate?" "That he left everything to my mother," Martin answered. "That is what you were told," Ben replied. "But that is not what happened." He placed a document on the table. "Your father wrote a legal will in 1999. In that will he divided his estate into 3 parts. 1/3 for your mother. 1/3 for you and your siblings. And the final third." Ben paused. "For another woman named Comfort and her son." The kitchen became silent. "What son?" Martin asked slowly. Ben placed a photograph on the table. A young boy with dark skin, a wide forehead, and a smile that looked painfully familiar. "Your father had another family," Ben said. "They had a son named Junior Donatus. He is 22 now. And he has been trying to contact your family for 3 years." Martin stood up slowly and walked to the window. His back faced everyone as he struggled to breathe. Aina said nothing. Some moments are too heavy for words. Finally Martin asked, "How long have you known this?" 3 years, Ben answered. "And you waited until now?" Ben looked at Aina, then back at Martin. "I waited until the truth would be used correctly." Flora finally spoke. "We go to church on Sunday." Everyone looked at her. Regina's big Thanksgiving service. Television cameras. Hundreds of guests. She paused. "Junior and his mother will be there. And the truth will finally be there too." Flora looked at her daughter. "I have been planning this since the day that woman slapped you." Sunday arrived. Regina Donatus stood proudly at the front of the church wearing gold. She greeted guests. She smiled for cameras. She received compliments. The perfect image of success. She did not notice Junior Donatus sitting quietly in the 5th row. The service began. Songs were sung. Prayers were spoken. Then Regina stepped forward to give her testimony. She spoke about sacrifice. About raising her children alone. About God blessing her life. People in the congregation wiped tears. Then Uncle Ben stood up. "With respect," he said calmly, "I would like to present something to this congregation." He opened his briefcase. A will signed by Chief Donatus in 1999. The church murmured. "This man is lying," Regina said quickly. But Ben calmly placed copies of the documents in front of the pastor. Then Junior stood up. "My name is Junior Donatus," he said. "Chief Donatus was my father. And I am only here because he wanted me to exist openly." The church fell into complete silence. Regina turned desperately toward Martin. "Everything I did for you," she said. Martin looked at his mother for a long time. "I know, Mama," he replied quietly. "And that is the saddest part." Outside the church later, Aina stood beside her mother under a tree. "What happens now?" she asked. Flora smiled softly. "Now you go home. You eat. You rest. And you raise your child in a house where silence never costs more than dignity." Martin walked toward them. His tie was loose. His eyes tired, but clear. "Can we go home?" he asked Aina. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took his hand. Not because everything was fixed, but because she had learned something important. Survival is not the end of a woman's story. It is only the beginning of who she becomes. The sun shone brightly above the church compound. Children played by the gate. Someone's phone had already uploaded the video online. And somewhere inside the church Regina Donatus sat quietly, finally facing the weight of 20 years of buried secrets. Flora watched her daughter walk forward with her head high. And she thought silently to herself, "That is my child. And she is going to be just fine." If you enjoyed this powerful story of courage, truth, and family secrets, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel African Folktales. On this channel, you'll discover emotional African stories, powerful life lessons, dramatic family secrets, and unforgettable folktales that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now to African Folktales and turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful story. Because the next story might be even more shocking than this one.